Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Today, a bit of cast iron milling with the horizontal mill. As you saw in my last very short video, I got a new boring head. It's a 2.5-inch Flynn boring head, and I needed one so I could bore out the arbor bushings in my horizontal supports. After doing a couple of fairly minor tests, I determined that now I can actually do some horizontal milling. I didn't do it very often before because my cutters, no matter what I did, no matter how clean I kept my spacers, I measured them, I measured pretty much everything. The support itself was out. It wasn't in line with the spindle. Essentially, one of the bores was just wonky. But I bored it out. It's good now. I did mess up one of the bushings, so I'm going to have to make a new one. I'll probably make one out of 3-inch 4140 because that's what I have. But in any case, we've got a decent sized milling project today, and I'm going to give you guys some tips for horizontal milling. The machining I need to do to this cross slide to adapt it for forging press use is quite simple. All I need to do is flatten this bottom here, partially so that I can sort of make it thinner just a little bit. It'll only be about 1 inch, and also so that I can, to prevent me from breaking this. Again, this sort of valley here in the middle that's been left unmachined, well, that's not very good for the forging press, or not really bad for the forging press, but it's bad for the cast iron itself. Cast iron really likes to be in compression and not tension. If I left this like that and put it on the forging press and didn't support it in the middle and only supported it on either end, then that would mean that I have contact points here, here, and in the middle. The middle would be forcing up, or forcing down in this case, and then it would only be supported on either end. That's not good. Cast iron doesn't like that. That would cause it to flex, and cast iron doesn't flex. It breaks quite violently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mill this whole thing flat. A couple of tips for horizontal milling. People tend to have issues with their cutters running out or having run out, either not being parallel to the arbor or just simply having run out. A couple of things that can cause this are your spacers not being parallel and maybe even having trash in between them. That will cause the cutter to not be parallel to the arbor. It could be that your arbor is simply worn. My arbor actually is in pretty bad shape. It has some spots where cutters obviously spun on it, and I think it's even bent. Bent arbors, smaller bent arbors, they don't cause as much of an issue if all of your spacers are good, your running bushings are good, and you kind of crank down quite a bit, as long as your arbor support is also good. Speaking of the arbor support, that can also be an issue. The arbor support might not be in line with your spindle. If it isn't, it's going to tilt the arbor in some direction, and that's just going to cause all sorts of problems. That's the issue I had with this arbor support. It wasn't perfectly in line. I bored it out, and now it runs pretty good. Even though this arbor is beat up, these spacers are a bit beat up, it runs decent. It's not perfect. I would like to get some nice arbors, and I would also like to replace this bushing. It's just boring it didn't go very well, but it does work. I have a 6-inch high-speed steel stagger tooth cutter, 24 teeth. I believe it's a Niagara. It's fairly sharp. I'm going to be running fairly slow because I don't know how hard this cast iron is. From the looks of it, not super hard, but I'm going to be running it at about 50 surface feet per minute, which is the lowest speed on this machine, 35 RPM, 24 teeth, and I'm going to go with 7 thou per tooth. That's consistent with what I've seen other charts say I should run it at. 7 thou per tooth brings me to 5 inches a minute. So even though I'm running it fairly slow, it's not going to be going very slow. It's going to be running relatively fast. Another thing, some people don't put keys in the keyways. They think that just the friction of these spacers is enough. That's wrong. You always put keys in it unless it's a slitting saw. If it's a slitting saw, don't put a key in it. If you're worried about breaking cutters, then make a key out of brass or bronze or copper or whatever soft material. Yeah. Another thing that can break cutters or can really cause issues is your cutter becoming dull. If it dulls, then it'll just take so much force to turn it that it'll explode. I've had that happen a couple of times. Not fun. It'll either explode or it will shear the key. One or the other. So with that being said, let's get to milling. Cast iron sucks to machine. Very dusty, no coolant. No coolant, no oil, no nothing. Just run it dry. So let's get to it. I've been jabbering on for too long.
I often take these night shift walks when the foreman's not around. I turn my back on the cooling stacks and make for open ground. Far out beyond the tank farm fence where the gas flare makes no sound. I forget the stink and I always think back to that eastern town. I remember back 6 years ago, this western life I chose. And every day the news would say some factory's going to close. Well, I could have stayed to take the dole, but I'm not one of those. I take nothing free and that makes me an idiot, I suppose. So I bid farewell to the eastern town I never more will see. But work I must, so I eat this dust and breathe refinery. Oh, I miss the green in the woods and streams, and I don't like cowboy clothes. But I like being free, and that makes me an idiot, I suppose. So come all you fine young fellers who've been beaten to the ground. This western life's no paradise, but it's better than lying down. All the streets aren't clean and there's nothing green, and the hills are dirty brown. But the government dole will rot your soul back there in your hometown. So bid farewell to the eastern town you never more will see. There's self-respect and a steady check in this refinery. You will miss the green in the woods and streams, and the dust will fill your nose. But you'll be free and just like me, an idiot, I suppose.
So those last cuts did really well. It didn't take me very long, but I did make one little mistake. I thought that the cutter was rotating at 35 RPM. It was actually going at 73. Not really an issue. That was doing pretty well. It did rub at a couple of points, but overall it sounded great. And also, those cuts were, I guess, heavy enough to quiet the mill down. It used to be very grumbly, very squeaky, it just made a lot of noise. Now it really doesn't. It was not that quiet before. It's kind of nice. I was running at about half the IPM I should have been. I should be running at 12. I was running at 4. 4 3/4. Let's see how it does now. Alright, now that these two surfaces here and here are cleaned up, they're not so jagged, I'm going to get a form cutter, or I guess it's kind of a form cutter. Let me show you. Three-eighths-inch cutter. 1/2 of it is flat. Or not 3/8 inch cutter, but 3-inch cutter. 1¼ inch arbor. Half of it squares. The other half has a good radius on it. I'm going to use the radius, go in here and clean this up. Clean this up over here so that I don't have all that jagged mess where it broke. The reason I'm using a radius cutter is because I want a radius. Cast iron does not like sharp corners. If you have anything made out of cast iron with very sharp corners, internal or external, I would heavily suggest a radius. Cast iron, it cracks and just kind of doesn't do good with that kind of stuff. Yeah, I guess just change out the arbor. Not the arbor, but the cutter. And that's it. First time around, I put the cutter on backwards. The radius is on the wrong side. It happens. Another thing with specifically Kearney and Checker mills, and I believe Brown and Sharp mills, the reason that with that handle on the side, you can pull it out and only move one ram, is so that you can move one ram out, bring your arbor support out off of your arbor, and then just rotate it up, and then have it in a resting position without having to take the whole thing off. Sadly, this arbor is a bit too long. I really need an 18-inch arbor. This is a 24-inch arbor. And also I just need a nicer arbor. This one, you might have seen it, but this one's pretty beat up. A pretty bad mistake. I didn't tighten down the arbor support, and so it sort of creeped towards the cutter whenever I was taking that second cut. I thought maybe I left my y-axis feed engaged. I didn't. Yeah, this is just this thing not being tightened down. So it's been deburred, all the edges have been broken. Mounted up the 2 chunks of angle iron. Bottom is good and flat. Well, I tried to get it all welded up. These angle iron brackets welded to some 1/2-inch steel plate. But a bunch of the welds broke, so I'll have to go through and get all those re-welded. That is AR400, which doesn't like to weld without some preheat. A couple of these did hold though. That guy held, I think. Yeah, the guy down there held. And then that nut held. That nut did not hold. Oh well. Well, that's it for this video. As you guys saw, the welds didn't take, and that makes for, let's see. Firstly, I had the wrong speed on the cutter. Secondly, I put the cutter on incorrectly. Thirdly, I had the arbor support not locked down, and fourth thing that went wrong, the welds didn't hold. It happens. Sometimes projects are like that. They just try to fight you at every way, or you fight yourself in many ways, because many of these mistakes were my own. The next video is going to be a collaboration. A local YouTuber, or I don't know if he's a YouTuber, all I know really is that he wanted a knife blank, and he also wants to make a video on making the handle and sheath. So I took one of those bearings that I have, 52-100 from a paper mill, and one part of it I made into a small whittling knife. It's fairly thick, thicker than what he wanted, but really with a whittling knife you want it to be a bit thicker so you don't hurt your thumb. One chunk of it I made his beautiful little knife, and the other chunk I made a decent sized spatula. That video has a fair amount of forging. It's a very long, essentially a time lapse of those hours of forging. And then hopefully after that I'll have another update on the power hacksaw. The power hacksaw has been more or less fighting me every step of the way. I really wish I would have stayed on the drawing board a bit longer and really thought out the design more. I was thinking more for capacity versus the actual design and where the forces were going. I can get it to cycle now. I have replaced the dovetail ways with boxerways. Completely replaced them. I actually took a chunk of forklift tine and made a new slideway system that is adjustable. I ground off the old dovetail bar that was two chunks of, I think, 3/8 inch material, or 3/8 inch flat bar that was welded together. That stuff just kept flexing and it was getting thinner as I was trying to machine away at it. Yeah, so I ground it off and welded on a chunk of 1-inch steel that I got from the scrapyard and machined all that. And I can get it to cycle, but still has a couple of other issues. The downfeed system isn't working, and it's just not as rigid as I would like. So, with that being said, hopefully I can get that done soon, and the next video coming out in the next couple of weeks is going to be forging, and hopefully I'll make another one forging. I have a project for my F100. I need to make a bunch of little knobs, and I'm going to be making some custom forging dies for that. So, if you made it to the end of this very long and very rambly video, thank you, and have a good day.